Hey fans, what's up? And welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chof Gimel, Daf 23 of Masechta Hagiga. Friends, we continue on our quest to understand tumah and tahara. Good luck. Anyways, so yeah, we're just gonna kind of continue going through the Mishnah, talk about tumas midras and being able to carry barrels while carrying shoes that are tummy tumas midras, and why it applies to kodesh and not to truma, and then finishing vessels and why it's tummy for kodesh but not for truma. So anyways, a lot of very fun stuff. So let us start on Daf Chof Beis Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Hanose es hamidros, nose es hatruma, avalo es hakodesh. All right. So a fellow carries midras. What's midras? So I don't know, if you take it like a shoe, for example, right? You have a guy, he's a zav. Zav. What do you want me to tell you? So he's a zav, and so zav is an avatum. Now there's a special halacha when it comes to zav that anything that he sort of puts his weight on, his mishkav and moshav, things that he sits on. And I guess a shoe is kind of included in that, to the extent that, you put all your weight on a shoe. So anyways, a fellow is carrying a shoe, and he's also carrying a barrel. Alright? So, hanoses hamidros noses hatruma avalos hakodesh. So a fellow who is carrying like a shoe that's tamei tumas midros, so he can carry a barrel if it's a truma barrel, but not if it's a kodesh barrel. Kodesh my time below. How come you can't carry a kodesh barrel? Because of a particular incident. Maise says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel that there was a certain incident. You had a fellow, and he was transporting a barrel of consecrated wine, sacramental wine, right? Right, Robin Hood Men in Tights, wasn't that? Right, sacramental wine, right? That's what it was, right? For the boys in the trees. So yeah, if I remember correctly, so if it's I can't even remember anymore. Sacramental wine, right? Anyways, so he was moving a barrel full of sacramental wine from one place to another. V'nifsika ritzua shel sandalo, and the strap of his sandal broke. V'natla v'inicha alpi chovis, and he then, I guess, took off, I don't know, either the shoe or the strap, and he took it and he put it on the opening of the barrel. V'nafla l'avir chovis, and then the strap that is tamei tumas midros then fell into the airspace of the barrel, v'nitmes, and the whole barrel became tamei bos shah amu, and therefore at that point they said, anoses hamidros, noses hatruma, havalos hakodesh. So at that point they said that somebody who was carrying midras, right, so like a shoe of a zav, so then he is allowed to carry truma, but he's not allowed to carry kodesh, right? Because we just had this incident. We have a fellow who is carrying kodesh in his shoe, who is tamei tumas midras, and the strap broke and ended up getting into the airspace of the barrel, makes the whole barrel tamei. So to avoid that situation, they say that, just like in that story, it happened with kodesh, so also we don't carry midras and kodesh at the same time, but truma is okay. Yochi truma nami, but one second, shouldn't we say the same thing by truma? Just like we're concerned that the midras might contaminate the kodesh, shouldn't we also be concerned that it'll contaminate the truma? Homani Reb Chanani ben Akavyahi. Well, the author of our Mishnah, who is only concerned about kodesh but not truma, is none other than Reb Chanani ben Akavya, the Omar lo asu ela biyardin v'sfinu, who says in a different case that we're going to see momentarily, that in that case we say all that is asur is the Jordan River and on a boat, uchmaisa shahoya, and like a story that happened. Let's go weiter a shtickle and understand exactly what Reb Chananya ben Akavia's opinion actually was, and then we'll see how it ties into this case of the shoe and the barrel. Maihi, so what's this incident? The Tanyas we learn in the Brayso. So Adam mechatos ve'efer chatos. A person shall not carry water with the ashes of the parah aduma in it, or the ashes of the parah aduma themselves, v'avirim b'yardin v'sfina, and he should not carry them in the Jordan River and on a boat. V'lo yamod b'tzad zeh v'yizukim l'tzad acher, nor should he stand on one side of the Jordan and chuck it to the other side. V'lo yishitem al pnei hamayim, you shouldn't float this mechatas or the ashes themselves on the water. V'lo yirkav al gabi behema, he shouldn't ride on an animal, v'lo al gabi chavero, nor on his friend, elim ken raglav nogos bakarka, unless his legs were able to touch the ground. But you would be able to transport the mechatas or the efer paraduma by way of a bridge, and that's fine. And this doesn't just apply to the Jordan, but it applies to all rivers. Now, Chanani ben Akavia Omer says of Chanani ben Akavia lo asu ela b'yardin u'b'sfina uchmaise shehoyo, that the only thing that is not allowed is to transport the mechatas or the efer paraduma on the Jordan on a boat. That is what's not allowed. Because of the incident, my Maisa Shoya, what was the incident? Rav Yehuda says, Rav Yehuda, the name of Rav Maisa Bada Mecha, that there was an incident with a certain fellow, Sheyamavir Mechatas Ve'efer Chatas Bayarden, that he was transporting water that had the ashes of the paraduma mixed into it, as well as the ashes of the paraduma themselves, Bayarden of Asfina, on the Jordan River in a boat. And sure enough, they found that there was a size of an olive's worth of a dead of a corpse in the bottom of the boat, and which means that they were making an ohel on it, right? That they were basically walking over it, and then they became tamei, and the mechatas, everything became tamei. Amru, and at that time they said, Lo yisa adam mechatas ve'efer chatas ve'avim bayadin basfina, and therefore you should not, but just like in that case where there was a fellow on the Jordan with on a boat, and it turned out that there was a kazayis min hameis on the boat, and it was a problem. So therefore, we do not transport mechatas and efer chatas on the Jordan in a boat. Now, the opinion of Reb Chananya ben Akavia is that it is limited to the incident exactly, right? Meaning, Reb Chananya ben Akavia's opinion is that just like in that case, it was on the Jordan River in a boat, says Reb Chananya ben Akavia, that's the only situation, that is the only way that you're not allowed to transport the mechatas and the efer para aduma is on a boat on the Jordan. But otherwise, you could throw it from one side to the other, you can go on somebody's shoulders, whatever it is, that's no problem. The Tanna Kama disagrees and says, no, it's not just the Jordan and on a boat, but it's sort of any way of transporting across the river. The only way that would be allowed would be if you walk, if your feet, as we said, if your feet are touching the ground, we said, don't go on your friend's shoulders or on an animal unless your feet can touch the ground, right? We want your feet to be able to touch the ground. So on a bridge would be fine, or to walk across would be fine, but don't throw it from one side of the river to the other side of the river. Certainly don't put it on a boat, don't float it, any of these kinds of things. That's what the Tanna Kama says. Whereas Reb Chananya ben Akavia says, no, it's exactly like in the incident. What you're not allowed to do is on the Jordan River in a boat, do not transport efer paraduma as well as mechatas. Now, so we see that Reb Chananya ben Akavia's opinion is that we go literally by the book based on what this incident was. And therefore, taking it back full circle to our case, so we have a fellow who had this shoe that was tummy tumas midras, and the strap ended up getting in the barrel. But guess what? That was a barrel of yain, of chavis shel yain kodesh, sacramental wine, and therefore, if we're saying that it's Chananya ben Akavia, that he goes based on the story itself, and the story itself was sacramental wine, and therefore he is the author of our Mishnah, who is saying that specifically in the context of Kodesh, you would not be allowed to carry midras with a barrel, but by Truma it would be allowed because Truma was not in that story. That story was specifically by Kodesh, by sacramental wine. Alright, that was pretty fun stuff. Yibailu de Asakasha, sandal tame, sandal taramau. So certainly if the sandal is tame, tumas midras, so we're saying you wouldn't be allowed to carry it with the barrel. But what about if it was tahor? Mahu. What would we say? Would we say that, well, just like you wouldn't be allowed to carry a tame one, you also can't carry a tahor one? Chavas psucha, chavas esuma mahu. Certainly if the barrel was open, you would not be allowed to carry the shoe, but what if it was closed? What if he did it anyways? Right? What if he nonetheless carried this midras shoe with the barrel? Now what? So Rabbi Ila Amar im Avar v'nasa Tami, Rabbi Zera Amar im Avar v'nasa Tar. So regarding at least the last clause, which is what if he did it anyways? Well, Rabbi Ila says if he does it anyways, then it would be Tame, whereas Rabbi Zera says, look, if he does it anyways, as long as it remains Tahor, it would be Tahor. So now continuing in our Mishnah, the Mishnah had said, Kelim hanigmarim b'tayra v'chulei, right? So we said that if you have a vessel, so of course a vessel is only able to become tummy once it's actually a vessel, right? So let's say you're making a vessel. I don't know, who wants to give me an example of a vessel? It's an example of a vessel. It's an example of a vessel. I don't know, a coffee mug. Should we say a coffee mug? Does anybody have a different? A bowl. A bowl, the mice say. I'm looking at a bowl right now. I bought it at the Betzalel end of year exhibition a few years ago. I'm looking at that bowl. It's made out of ceramic. So until it actually becomes a kli, until it becomes a bowl, it can't become tummy. Right? Only a vessel can become tummy. But before then, it doesn't become tummy. We're saying that kelim anigmarim b'tayre, that if you have a vessel that is completed, and now it's a vessel, it's able to become tameh, but it was completed in a state of purity, so for truma you do not have to toivel it, but for kodesh you would have to toivel it. Interesting. So now, Frak the Gemara, the gaminu man, who is completing this vessel? Ilem de gaminu chaver. If it's being completed by a chaver, somebody who knows the halachos of tumah and tahara, so lamalu tvila. Why would you have to toivel it in the mikvah? I mean, you have a chaver, you have a guy who knows the halachos. He's completing the vessel in purity. Why should he have to put it in the mikvah? It's pure. El de gaminu ama oretz. So rather it must be that an ama oretz, somebody who doesn't know the halachos of tumah and tahara, he completed the vessel, and therefore we have to put it in the mikvah. But one second, the Mishnah says that if you have a vessel that is completed in a state of purity, so it has to go to the mikvah. You have to toivel it. The question is, well, if it's an ama aretz, then we wouldn't consider it as though it was completed in purity. In order for it to be completed in purity, he would have to be a chaver. But if he's a chaver, then it's pure. Why do you have to put it in the mikveh? Amar Rabbi bar Shila, Amar Rav Masna, Amar Shmuel, le'olam de gaminu chaver. So it is actually talking about where a chaver, somebody who knows the halachos of tumah and tahara, completed the vessel, and then you're going to ask, well, if it's a chaver, then why do you have to put in the mikvah? Mishum tzinoyer da am ha'aretz denofa. Or maybe it's mishum tzinoyer da am ha'aretz, because of the spittle of an am ha'aretz. The am ha'aretz, right? Maybe he's a zav. How do I know? Maybe he's a zav, and if he's a zav, maybe he's going to spit. His spit is going to get on the vessel, and therefore it would be tameh, and we have to be concerned that maybe it's tameh, and therefore you put it in the mikvah. Denofal emas. Now, when would the spit of the am ha'aretz fall into the vessel? If it's going to fall onto the vessel before it's complete, well, halav mono. Well, then it's not a vessel and it can't become tameh anyways. Elabasur de gamre. So, okay, I guess maybe the spit fell on the vessel after it was complete, and that's why you have to put in the mikvah. Mizayir zarbu. But if that's the case, if the vessel was already complete, so then the chaver would have been careful to make sure that no spit of an am ha'aretz is getting on the vessel. So the olam mikamed de gamre. So really, it's talking about before the vessel was completed. But we have to be concerned that even though the spit of the Am Haaretz got into the vessel before it was complete, so it wasn't tummy at that point, however, maybe at the point that the vessel became complete, the spit was still wet. And if the spit was still wet, so then we have to be concerned that maybe the spit of the Am Haaretz got in the vessel, and then even by the time when it was complete, it was still wet, and it was metame the vessel. Because we're going to learn in Masechta Nida in another 5.5 years that the spit and the urine of a zav is an avatumah. So we have to be concerned that maybe his spit got on the vessel and it was still wet when the vessel was complete, and therefore maybe it's tamei, and therefore you dip it in the mikveh. Tvila in ha'ariv shemesh lo. So now the Gemara says that the Mishnah says that you have to toivel it, right? What does it say? It says you have to toivel it. So the Gemara wants to infer, you have to toivel it, but ha'ariv shemesh lo. But you would not need ha'ariv shemesh. Meaning you would be able to just put it in the mikvah, and after you put it into the mikvah, so then immediately it is pure. I guess kind of like we do nowadays, right? Whenever you take something to the mikvah and you toivel it, so you toivel it and then that's it. It's done. It's ready to go. So, as opposed to, of course, we've learned about Tvul Yom, right? For example, I don't know, you have a Zav on day 7 of being a Zav, so he goes to day 7 after not seeing any Ziva, so then he goes to the mikvah. From between the time that he goes to the mikvah and the end of the day, he's called a Tvul Yom, right? He wouldn't be allowed to eat Truma yet or anything like that. Truma. So he's got to wait till the evening. Yet, over here we're saying that this vessel that was completed in a state of purity, but maybe we have to be concerned that perhaps in Am Haaretz some of the spit got on it. So we said that in that case you toivel it, you put it in the mikveh, but that's it. You don't have to wait till the end of the day. So Masnisin Dloker Reb Eliezer. So we want to say that Memele must be that our Mishnah is not like Reb Eliezer, because Reb Eliezer would require that when you toivel a vessel in the mikveh out of concern that maybe the spit of an Am Haaretz got on it, says Reb Eliezer, right, we're assuming for now that Reb Eliezer's opinion would be that you would have to wait until nightfall. Kilu, after you toivel it, you'd have to wait till nightfall. And our Mishnah, however, is arguing and saying that no, you just need to toivel it, and then it becomes tahor immediately. So our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer. It's not, as we learned in the Mishnah, shvoferes shechotcho lichatos, that if you are preparing, the ashes of a para aduma, and you take like a hollow reed and you cut it for containing the mechatas, right? The para aduma ashes. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yitbol miyad. So Rabbi Eliezer says that you dip it in the mikvah immediately. Rabbi Yoshua Omer yitame v'achar kach yitbol. Whereas Rabbi Yoshua says that you first need to make it tameh and then you put it in the mikvah. Now, if you remember back to the first daf of Masechta Yoma, so we said over there that when it comes to the para aduma, we specifically make the Kohen who is doing the service tameh and put him in the mikvah, and then afterwards he's a tvul yom until the end of the day, and he specifically does the avodah of para aduma as a tvul yom, because it's Dukim held that a tvul yom is not allowed to do the service of the para aduma, whereas the Prushim, those who argue on the Tzedukim, right, the rabbinic sort of Judaism, they say that the Kohen who is doing the service of the para aduma can even be a tvul yom, and therefore to drive that point home and to show the tzedukim that they're wrong, they would deliberately make the Kohen into a tvul yom at the time that he is doing the service of the para aduma. And therefore, Rabbi Eliezer says that it's enough that when you cut this reed and you complete it as a vessel, it's enough to then just take it and put it directly into the mikvah. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says it's not enough to put it directly into the mikvah, you first have to make it tameh. right? Meaning we make the Kohen tamei, but also the vessels that uses tamei. Therefore, it says Rabbi Yoshua, you first have to make it tamei, and only then do you put it into the mikvah. So now, right? So again, so Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yitbol Miyat. So Rabbi Eliezer says you could just, after you cut the tube, you could just put it in the mikvah immediately. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Yitame v'achar kach Yitbol. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua says first you need to make the tube tamei, and only after that can you dip it in the mikvah. Ve'avinon, but and we ask the chatcha man, who's the one who's cutting the reed? Ileme the chatcha chaver. If it's a person who knows the halachos of tumah and tahara, he's cutting the reed. So lama li tvila. Why do you have to toivel it? I mean, he's a chaver, he knows the halachos of tumah and tahara. Of course, he's going to make sure that it remains tahor. Rather, it must be that an amma aretz is the one who cut it. So, Rabbi Yoshua yitame v'yidbol. But one second, if it's an amma aretz who's cutting the reed, then why would Rabbi Yoshua have to suggest that he first needs to be metame the reed before putting it in the mikvah? Hatame v'koi. It's already tamei because an amma aretz was handling it. So for Omar Rabba Barshila, it says Ab Barshila, Omar Rav Masna, Omar Shmuel, Le'olam D'chot Chachaver. It is really talking about where somebody who knows the halachos of tumah and tahara cut the tube. Umishum Tzinor Da'ama Oretz, and the concern is for the spit of an Amma Oretz, that maybe the spit of an Amma Oretz got onto this tube, and out of concern that just in case that happened, so we toivel it in the mikvah. Now, dinafal emas, just like we said earlier with the vessel, so when did the spit fall onto the reed? If it's before he cut it, so halav manu, at that point it wasn't a vessel yet, because he hadn't yet cut it. Ve'ela basu the chatcha. So rather, okay, so maybe then it's after he cut it. But mizayir zorba, but after he cut it, then he would already be careful with it. Why would he have to put it in the mikvah? So the ola mikame dilichatcha. So really, it is before he cut it and made it into a vessel, and therefore, if it's not a vessel, so then why would he have to put it in the mikvah? Be'id dilma be'idnei dilichatcha adayin lachahi. Well, what just happened? So right, so the spit of the Amaretz got onto this tube before it was cut, so it wasn't yet a vessel. But perhaps when the tube was cut, the spit of the Amaretz was still wet, and therefore it makes the tube can make the tube tamei, and that is why we put it in the mikvah. Okay, so you're preparing this tube for the para aduma, and the spit of an amaretz may have gotten on it before it was cut, but then it was still wet when it was cut, and it was already a kli, and therefore we put it in the mikvah. Now, b'shlam Rabbi Yoshua. So I understand according to Rabbi Yoshua, hanu t'ika ekera l'tzidukin. So this is how there's a heker to the tzidukin, meaning, according to Rabbi Yoshua, he would say that if you have, in this case of this reed, that some of the spit of the amaretz got on it before it was cut, and then maybe after it was cut, perhaps the spit of the amaretz is still there, and it's gonna make the reed tamis. If we put it into the mikvah. Now I understand according to Rabbi Yoshua, well, after putting it into the mikvah, it would now become tahor immediately, like like we want to imply in our Mishnah, right? That you take the vessel that is now complete, and you put it in the mikvah, and it's now tahor immediately. So I understand according to Rabbi Yeshua, he would say the same thing, that the tube would become tummy immediately, and therefore it would not be a tvul yom, right? It wouldn't have the status of a tvul yom. It would just be tahor immediately, and therefore there's no sort of shtach to the tzedukim, right? There's no in your face to the tzedukim because it's a tahor vessel. So therefore, Rabbi Yeshua says you actually have to make it tameh first, so that even after you put it in the mikvah, it's still going to be be a tvul yom. It's still going to be tameh until the evening. So b'shlam Rabbi Yeshua, I understand according to Rabbi Yeshua, hanu d'ika eker l'tzedukin. This is how there is going to be a sort of a distinction to sort of prove wrong the tzedukim, because according to Bishur, you are deliberately making the tube tamei. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, that they would make tamei the kohen who prepared the para aduma in order to drive it in the face of the tzedukim, that they would say that the para aduma was specifically prepared by people who nightfall had already befallen them, i.e. they were no longer a tvul yom. So therefore, we would go out of our way to make the kohen who would do the service into a tvul yom, so that he would to make the point that a tvul yom is allowed to prepare the para aduma. And as part of that, also this tube, this vessel that we're putting the ephah para aduma, the ashes of the para aduma into, we would want that also to sort of be sort of like a tamei until the night kind of status. So Ella, Rabbi Eliezer, now according to Rabbi Eliezer, Yomut B'Shlomo Be'alma Ba'in Harav Shemesh. Well, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it would have to sound like, well, normally if you would take this tube and you would put it into the mikvah, it would be tamei nonetheless until the evening, until nightfall. Hainu di'ika kere the tzedukin. And therefore, if we say that according to Rabbi Eliezer, after you put a vessel in the mikvah, it's still tamei until the nightfall, that's why he says that you can just put the tube into the mikvah immediately, because even so, it's going to be tamei until the nightfall. And that is the heker, the distinction to go against the tzedukim, because even after this vessel is put into the mikvah, still it's going to be tamei until the evening, and you're going to use that for the avoda nonetheless. But if you say that according to Rabbi Eliezer, in general, a vessel that you put in the mikvah does not need to wait until nightfall to become tahor, rather it's tahor immediately. Well, in that case, ma'aker the tzedukin ika. Well, then, what is the distinction for the tzedukim? Right? If according to Rabbi Eliezer, immediately after you put the vessel into the mikveh, it's tahor. Well, then, when Rabbi Eliezer says that by this tube you just put it into the mikveh immediately, well, then it's going to be tahor. What is the sort of distinction for the tzedukim to sort of prove wrong in their face to the tzedukim, that to show that we're using this vessel even though it's tamei until the evening? Omar Rav, says Rav, well, the rabbis treat it as if it was like a tmei sheretz, meaning you could say that even according to Rabbi Eliezer, in general, when you take a vessel and put it in the mikveh, it becomes tahor immediately. However, in this particular case, the rabbis treat this tube as if it was like a tmei sheretz, which midaraisa, you would be tamei until the evening, right? Meaning if you have a sheretz that's an ava tumah and it touches, let's say, a person, so then he becomes rishon l'tumah, and even after he goes to the mikveh, he's still tamei until the evening. Elameata lo tetame odom. But if that's the case, then it shouldn't make a person tamei, right? Okay, meaning if you have this vessel, and we treat it as if it's a tmei, right? This tube, and we treat it as if it's a tmei sheretz, i.e. a rishon l'tumah, so it can't be rishon l'tumah, cannot be metame people. Alamatanya, why does the Brisa say chot chomat bila ton tvila, that whoever, I guess, cuts it and puts it in the mikvah, he himself is required to go to the mikvah. But if it was a rishon l'tumos, then it wouldn't be metame adam. Ve'ela su'ah kitmei meis. Rather, we treat it like somebody became tamei from a mace. Okay, fine. Okay, I mean, still, I think it's a question that, I think there's generally a question like, but still, if it's a tmei mace, then still, it would be, no, I'm sorry. If we treat it like a tmei mace, so then, if we treat the tube like a tmei mace, so then it's an avatoma, and then it can be metame a person. If that's the case, tibai hazah shlishi v'shvi, but then you should have to sprinkle it on day 3 and day 7, right? If we treat it like a tmei mace, it's an avatoma, we'd have to sprinkle it on day 3 and day 7. Alomatanya chodcho matbila ta'un tvila. I'm sorry, so chodcho matbila. So why does it say that that you just cut it and put it into the mikvah? Tvila in hazah shlishi ushvi lo. We're saying that you just need to put it into the mikvah, but you don't need to actually sprinkle the ashes of the parah aduma on it. So ela asa'ua k'tmei meis b'shvi'i shelo. Well, we treat the tube like something that became tummy from a mace on day 7 of it, that you just need to put into the mikveh. We treat it as though it already has its sprinkling of day 3 and day 7. But 1 second, we learn in a brisa that they never just kind of made up halachis when it came to parah aduma. So how could we just be making up this thing that we treat this tube as if it's like day 7 of tumas hameis, that you just need to put in the mikveh? So Amar Abaye says, Abaye lo shelo amu kordo mitame moshav. So says Abaye, well, when we say that we didn't make any chidushim by parah aduma, it means that they didn't make completely different rules. Keditanya, for example, like we learned in a brisa, vayoshev ala kli, as we learned in Masechta Shabbos, that a person who sits on a vessel, so it becomes mitame tumas midras, yachol kafa sa'a v'yoshav alea. Is it possible if you took like a sa'a measure and flipped it over and sat on it, tarka v'yoshav alea, or a measure that holds 2 calves and sat on that, yehi tame, is it possible that the measure would now become tame? Tame tumas midras, tamudomar. Therefore it says vayoshev ala kli asher yeshiv olav yitma. Somebody who sits on a vessel that in general you sit on it becomes tameh. Mishim yuchad liyeshiva yotzu zeh she'obim lo amud v'naisim lachtenu. In order for something to become tameh tumas midras, right, for if a zav sits on something and it becomes an avatoma like him, so it would have to be something that's specific for sitting on, not something like a measure or something like that you don't normally sit on. That would not become tameh tumas midras. So therefore, when we say that we don't make any chidushim by parah aduma, means we don't completely make things up. Right? For example, we have halacha that amod v'naisim lachtenu, that kilu, in order for something to become tameh tumas midras, there has to be something that you generally sit on. So therefore, you can't come and say like if he sits on an axe, it becomes tameh tumas midras. You can't do that because it's not something that's normally sat on. So, however, when it comes to say that this vessel, right, is even after, according to Rabbi Eliezer, even after you put it into the mikveh, still it's tummy till the evening, because we treat it like as if it was a tmei mace. I guess we're not making up any new halachos. We're just treating it as if it was a tmei mace, that it would become tummy till the evening. So then I guess that would nonetheless be acceptable. All right. What do I mean to tell you? So that's how you can understand it according to Rabbi Eliezer. That according to Rabbi Eliezer, right, we could say that even according to Rabbi Eliezer, in general, when you take a vessel and you toivel the vessel, so it becomes tahara immediately. However, in this particular case of the tube of the parah aduma that you're going to be putting the ashes of the parah aduma in, so in that particular case, we treat the state of tumah in a sort of a unique way, that we treat it as if it was something that became tameh from corpse tumah on day 7, that all you have to do is put it into the mikveh, but it still remains tameh until the evening. Alright. Hakli mitzariv ma shebesochel hakodesh avalo letruma. A vessel could sort of join together all of its contents for kodesh but not for truma, and therefore if one part of it becomes tameh, the whole thing becomes tameh. So that applies specifically to kodesh but not to truma, but not immediately. How do we know this? Amar b'chanan d'amar kra. Says Reb Chanan that the pasuk says kaf achas asar zav lektars, 1 spoonful, that is 10 gold coins, I guess, and filled with frankincense. Hakasav asol lechol masher bekaf achas. So it says kaf achas, i.e. that we treat all the contents of the vessel, of the spoon, as one, and therefore even if you everything's all joined together, and even if you touch part of it, then the whole thing becomes tameh. Alright, fine. Masiv of Kahana, Rav Kahana asked the kasha on Rav Chanan, because Rav Chanan just learned it out from a pasuk, which makes it sound like it's the oraisa that we treat all the contents like one. Hosif Rabbi Akiva asolas v'aktoris v'alavon v'agacholim. That 1 second, that Rabbi Akiva added on to the ratio of the brisa, which was talking about things that become tameh, right? The ashes of the parah aduma that would become tameh midrabanan. And Hosif Rabbi Akiva asolas v'aktoris v'alavon v'agacholim, and Rabbi Akiva added on to that more dirabanan halachis. For example, fine flour or incense, frankincense, coals, Shemnaga Tvul Yom b'Miktaso, that if a Tvul Yom touched part of it, Pasal Eskulo, the entire, it all becomes Tameh, it all becomes Pasal. V'Hadar Abanani, and this is by this is on a level of Dirabanan. Mimai, how do we know that? Midiktani Reisha, because the first part of the Brisa says, "Hey, Reb Shimon ben Beseira," that Reb Shimon ben Beseira testified, "Al Efer Chatos Shenoga Atamim b'Miktaso," that when it comes to the ashes of the para aduma, that if somebody who's tamei touches part of it, so then all of it becomes tamei, and that mimele is a din derabanan, as Rashi says. The imikra, the bottom line of Rashi, the Reb Chanan lekel melef el kachim mizbeach avalefa paralo, because from the pasuk of Reb Chanan, that it says kaf achas asar zov lektoris, that everything in the kaf is one, is considered like one. Well, that's something that goes on the mizbeach, right? The frankincense that's burnt on the mizbeach. However, ashes of the paraduma would not be included in that, and therefore Reb Shimon ben Beseira is talking about the ashes of the paraduma. That's going to become, when we say that if you touch part of it, all of it becomes tamei. That's midrabanan, and we're saying the katani hosef Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva added on to it, i.e., he's saying that these other things are midrabanan as well, and therefore how could Reb Chanan be saying that it's midoraisa if we have a brisa that seems to be saying that it's these situations of touching part of it and all of it becoming tamei is only midrabanan. So Amr Rish Lakish Mishum Bar Kapara Lo Nitzucha El L'Shiyare Mincha, that when Rabbi Akiva says, when he mentions, it says Rabbi Akiva added even the soulless, even fine flour. So that's specifically talking about the leftovers of a korban mincha, because the oraisa tzarich kli lekli akli mitzarfo she'enu tzarich kli ein kli mitzarfo, because the oraisa we say that something that requires a vessel, so then the vessel could join it all together. But if it doesn't require a vessel, for example, the leftover flour of a mincha offering that goes to the Kohen, so it doesn't need a vessel anymore. So ein kli mitzarfo. So the oraisa, the vessel would not bring them all together to the extent that if you touch part of it, all becomes tamei. The Asur Rabbanan v'Gazru, and the rabbis came and they made a decree that afagav de'enu tzarich l'kli kli mitzarfo. And Rabbi Akiva is saying that the rabbis came along and said that even when it comes to the leftover flour from a mincha, from a flour offering, even though it doesn't need a vessel, nonetheless, if you touch part of it, all of it becomes tamei midrabanan. However, when midoraisa, if you needed the vessel, i.e., for the main flour of the mincha, so then midoraisa, if you touch part of it, all of it would become tamei, and that's what Reb Chanan is talking about. Tenach solas k'toras u'levona ma'ika l'meimar. Fine, so we explained how maybe Rabbi Akiva is saying that by flour there's a way to look at it, that it would be midrabanan, which is if we're talking about leftover flour. But what about incense and frankincense? So Nachman and Rabbi Barabua Kigon Shetzavan al Gabe Kartavla. Well, for example, if you take the incense and the frankincense and you put it on some kind of leather, like board of sorts. The oraisa yesh lo toch mitzarif, ein lo toch eino mitzarif. That means the oraisa, if it has like a vessel, like a cavity, so then it could join them all together. But if there's no cavity, it doesn't join them all together. Vasar Rabbanan v'tiknu, and the rabbis came and said that by the ktoris that you're putting on this hide, so the afagav de ein lo toch mitzarif, that even though it doesn't have a inside, it does join it all together. So we see that so Reb Chanan had said that this idea of part of it becoming tamei, then all of it becomes tamei, is mida oraisa. We had asked kashas, but Rabbi Akiva seems to be saying in a brisa that it's mida rabbanan. We said no, those are specific cases that it's mida rabbanan, but otherwise there are cases when it is mida oraisa. Ufliga de Reb Chanan ad Reb Chia ba'Abba, and Reb Chanan, who says that this concept of part of it becoming tamei, then all of it becomes tamei, is the oraisos that argues on Reb Chia bar Abba, Dam Reb Chia bar Abba, Am Reb Yochanan Meduso Rabbi Akiva Nishnes Mishnazo, that says Reb Chia bar Abba in the name of Reb Yochanan, that from the testimony of Rabbi Akiva, our Mishnah was said, i.e., that our Mishnah that says that when part of it becomes tamei, all of it becomes tamei, is Rabbi Akiva's opinion, i.e., that it is midir abanon, and therefore Taka argues on Reb Chanan, who says that it is midir oraisa. Well, friends, that was the Chav Gimel of Masechta Hagiga. So the first part of the Gemara was talking about if you're carrying like a shoe that's tummy to Masmidras, and then like the strap gets into the barrel and it's kodesh, then it all becomes tameh. And then the question was, well, why is that acceptable for truma? So we say, well, because it's based on a certain incident where a guy, like his shoe strap snapped and he was like carrying a pitcher, like a barrel, whatever. So, and that was by kodesh. And therefore, we say this halacha only applies to kodesh, just like that incident, but by truma would be okay. And this is the opinion of Reb Chanan, who says that we go exactly like how the incident unfolded. Then we saw a very, very, very interesting potential machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer, a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, and sort of we discussed whether there are nafkaminas for toiveling vessels, but basically our Mishnah had said that if a vessel became complete in a stage of purity, so then for kodesh you'd have to put it in the mikveh. We were trying to figure out why. We said, well, because maybe right before it was complete and Amma Aretz came in, some spit got on it, and it was still moist when it was complete, and therefore we have to be concerned that maybe it's tamei, and therefore we put it in the mikveh. And we're saying that once you put it in the mikveh though, then it's tahor immediately. And we wanted to say that maybe it's not like Rabbi Eliezer. So a machlokas between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer regarding a tube that you're making to store the ashes of a para aduma. And we say over there that the tube, Rabbi Eliezer says you could put it into the mikveh immediately, whereas Rabbi Yeshua says you first have to make it tamei and then put it into the mikveh. We wanted to say that according to Rabbi Eliezer, the reason why you could put into the mikveh immediately without making it tamei first is because he figures that even after you put it into the mikveh, it's still going to be tamei till the rest of the day. Right? And we need, by para aduma, that you have somebody who's tamei till the rest of the day, being involved with the para aduma, because the tzdukim argued that a tvul yom cannot take part in the para aduma. And therefore, Rabbi Eliezer seems to be saying that you could just put this tube immediately in the mikveh, and then it's going to be tamei until the evening anyways, whereas Rabbi Yeshua says, no, you put it into the mikveh, then it's tahor. And therefore you have to first be metamei it before you put it into the mikveh, so that then it will be tamei for the rest of the day. And we want to say that no, maybe Rabbi Eliezer actually also agrees that in general, when you toivel something, it becomes tahor immediately. However, in this case, maybe we davka treat by the paraduma, we treat this tube as if it was like, as if it became tummy from a tumas hameis, and it's on the last day, and you just have to put it into the mikvah, but it's nonetheless going to be tummy until the evening. Then we saw machlokas between Reb Chanan and Reb Chia bar Abba in the name of Reb Yochanan regarding, our Mishnah said that when it comes to kodesh, if you have a bunch of stuff in a vessel and you touch one part, then all of it becomes tamei. So Reb Chanan says that that's midoraisa. Reb Chia bar Abba says in the name of Reb Yochanan that that's dafka midorabanan. Friends, that was daf Chav Gimel Masechet Hagiga. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.